Now, the last piece of our background is that you have to be attuned to your biases. If you're not aware of your biases, they will become blind spots around these cultural identities that could and will prevent you from being validating and affirming. You may not realize you have a bias when it comes to 9-year-olds, right? You may have a bias with certain boys. You may have a bias with certain religion, and you don't even recognize it. And the psychologists have called this blind spot. This is one of my favorite books. It's one of our key books in our work. If you have not read it, please put it on your reading bucket list, right? And I love this book because it was some people call implied bias, or some people call it hidden bias, what some people call implicit bias or unconscious bias. They call the authors call hidden biases. I like that term, right? Because they're hidden. We can't see them, and they in fact serve as blind spots. No different than the blind spot that you have when you're driving in your car. The interesting thing is, and because I finally have a car that has a blind spot indicator, it took me a long time, but even the blind spot indicator misses sometimes, right? And so to me, it further supports this notion that we all have blind spots, right? And so I love the quote. This is a quote from the book, and it's kind of been manipulated by me, right? But it's a quote out of the book. It says, "We all have reminiscences which we would not tell everyone, but only to our friends. These reminiscences, by the way, are biases. We have other matters in our mind which we would not reveal even to our friends, but only to ourselves, and that in secret. And yet there are other things which we are afraid to tell even to ourselves, and every decent person has a number of such things stored away in our minds." So what it's saying is this is something we all do, and they happen on different levels. There are some biases that you can sit back and you're talking with friends and family, right? But there are some biases that you only keep to yourself. And then there are some biases that you are even ashamed or afraid to even admit to you. You sit back and you say, wow, did I think like that? Wow, did I say that? Right, to myself. In order to do this work authentically, you must be attuned to your biases. Your biases about your students' rings of culture, right? And if you're not willing to go there, there's no way that you can get to validation affirmation. There's no way that you can get to validation affirmation. And so this is the deep, hard work that we all must do. I have a little mnemonic to help you figure that out, right? And I call this mnemonic uh, check your filter, question your BS, listen to your deficit monitor. And this will help you stay attuned to the biases that are being talked about here, the blind spots, if you will. So your filter is where your knowledge is coming from, your upbringing, to tell the TV shows that you watch, whatever you read, the podcast, the talk radio, all of this influences our subliminal. We know this from Psychology 101. The part that you must remember is there's a part that you must remember. You are not aware of it, right? You're getting fed all this subliminal knowledge. Your parents used to say things to you over and over and over and over. It became part of your subconscious, right? So this is why you always got to take a step back and ask yourself this question: where did I get this information from? Right? Where did I get this thought process from? Because if that's called checking your filter. Now I use a famous example that I haven't used in a few years, right? Especially I haven't used it this past year since we've been in the pandemic. Is I share with people my favorite TV show of all time, right? And I caught up on all the episodes since I've been stay-at-home order here in California. And this might surprise you because I may not look the part, but my favorite TV show of all time is the Jerry Springer Show. I just want to let you know that, right? Yes, Jerry Springer's still on. Now there are other versions of it, right? We see them all. Pit Bulls and Parolees. You can say some of the Real Housewives shows. I mean, it just depends on how you look at it. So that's my filter, and I realize Jerry Springer has taught me about white culture, right? I don't have a lot of white friends. I don't live in a white community. I attended, pretty much very diverse schools, here in California. So when I ask myself, where did you learn about white culture? Then I go, oh my gosh, it's all the Jerry Springer I've been watching. Okay, that's called checking your filter. Now, when you think of Jerry Springer, what do you think when you think of Jerry Springer and white culture? What do you think of? Okay, so that has formulated an opinion for me. So all the things that kind of come with with Jerry Springer stereotypes causes me now to question my BS. Right? What does BS stand for? Just say it to the screen right now. Belief system. Okay, belief system. So now that I have a conscious awareness about my blind spot, then BS doesn't stand for blind spot, by the way. It is belief system. Now I have to question everything that I have kind of encountered in regards to Jerry Springer and white culture. I gotta re-examine everything. This re-examination causes me to then listen to my deficit monitor. And my deficit monitor is the little voice, the little sound, the feeling that comes over me that says, you know what, Sharaki, you are thinking with bias. Stop, right? And because I am a good person, let me just go back for a minute. See, it says the hidden biases of good people, right? It doesn't say the hidden biases of racists. It doesn't say the hidden bias of bigots. It says good people. Because I am a good person, I stop thinking in that prejudice, bias way. This is the three steps that I just did using Jerry Springer. And for those of you who take life too seriously, I was being facetious. I've never watched a Jerry Springer episode in my life, right? Well, okay, maybe one. All right. Okay, two. Okay, two. Right. You have to take these three steps around any confusions or any thoughts or anything that you have around culture, right? You have to check your filter. You got to say, where where did I get my information from in regards to this particular situation, or in regards to this, right? You got to then question your belief system. Say, wait a minute, is this BS or is this BS, right? Belief system or the other BS. And you have to listen to your deficit monitor. Now, the thing about it is this happens in everyday life. It happens when you go to the store and we're in this culture of mask wearing or not mask wearing. We're in this culture of this has become part of our culture now. And so what biases do you have? What biases do you bring to the table that you need to be aware of, that you need to stop and say, you know what? I don't know why that person is maybe doing or not doing that, but I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to value, right? And you and I both know we need more of this in our society. We need more of it explicitly. Well, this is the process of cultural responsiveness. So, as I was just saying, I skipped ahead a little bit. These are everyday biases, right? They happen every single day, right? And we have to understand that we've been trained to believe if we admit these biases, right, then we must be bad people, or we must be racist, or we must. But actually, if you are willing to admit your bias and move on, right, then that means that you are just being human. Right? That means that you're just doing what we normally do. The key is not to get stuck, not to stay there, not to become stubborn, not to hold on to your beliefs regardless. And this is kind of where family, I think, comes in, because a lot of us, sometimes the older generation, it's kind of hard to move them and so on and so forth, right? So I want you to think about your everyday biases. And do you get stuck, or do you sort of move on to the next thing? In our work, then we take all of this that I just described to you, and we have a mantra. It's called, it may be your first thought, don't let it be your last thought, right? And what we're saying is, we admit we all have first thoughts that can be prejudice, that can be biases, that can be misunderstandings, that can be misinterpretations. But we don't allow it to be our last thought, because we check our filter, we question our BS, we listen to our deficit monitor. And I want you to use this process to help you be a validator and affirmer. Let me be clear. Validation and affirmation is not just being positive. Of course, it's not just about the love piece, right? It's about you having a deep, honest reflection with yourself, saying, where are my biases? Where are my prejudices? Where are my misunderstandings? And then moving on, allowing yourself those first thoughts, but making sure that they're not your last thought. That's the deep hard work that we need you to get to. So I'll say it one last time. You cannot validate and affirm if you're unwilling to admit your biases, prejudices, misunderstandings.